Hey guys, it is finally feeling like spring around the farm. There's puddles everywhere, melt, there's that smell of manure. There's a lot of cleanup to do. Maybe I'll even show some of that later. We'll see. I mean, who doesn't want to watch somebody clean up manure? But where we're at right now, I'm working on Bunny's nails, getting everything, everybody manicured up for breeding season. And as I'm thinking about that, I thought I would do a video on the importance of pedigrees and keeping records for your rabbits. Now we have a rare breed, Champagne d'Argents, and I think it's important no matter what the breed to keep records. It's important for your genetics, but it's also important for people that are purchasing rabbits from you. Now, that may not be your plan. You may not be planning to sell rabbits, but eventually, if you're in rabbits, everybody starts to sell rabbits because rabbits is something that your herd grows, and you eventually end up with a lot of rabbits. This year, I have 9 breeding does going into the breeding season. I bred 4 last week, and then we're going to breed 4 this weekend, and then I'll have 1 and maybe another young one pending. She'll only be 5 months, so I'm not sure whether I'm going to breed her yet or not, but that'll be a lot of babies arriving in April and May. So stay tuned for that. Lots of cute bunny videos. But I always do all the nails before we start breeding season, just to make sure nobody's going to scratch anybody. But I'm going to take you inside, and we're going to go over a little bit of how to keep your records, how to design pedigrees, sort of. I mean, I'm not an expert at this by any means. There are computer programs you can use. There's so many options out there. I'm kind of the old school. I made a Word document that I now just photocopy. But anyways, once I'm done out here, I will take you inside and we will get that going and sorted out. I keep getting distracted by all the birds flying around. It is spring. We have red-winged blackbirds back. There's the grackles. The geese are flying over like crazy. So I know we have a couple more cold days coming, but I think it's finally here. Anyways, we'll be right back, and we'll go over the pedigrees. So we are back inside. Bunny's nails are all trimmed up, and I've got my book out here that I was going to go through with you, just kind of how we keep our records. Now, as I said outside, by no means is this the be-all or the absolute way that you have to do this. Everybody has their own ways. There are rabbit programs for your computer that you can buy that track genetics and things like that in your herd. We've not advanced to that. We do the old school with keeping records on paper, and I bring out my pedigrees when it comes time for breeding, and I see if anybody's related, and yeah, we do it that way. But let's take a peek at the book. The book is basically just a binder, and in it we have kind of a little bit of a breeding schedule and just every kind of pedigree of our rabbits that we have. Everybody has a number up top, their name if they were named, and then their pedigree. We do keep little records. Some of them, let's see here if I can find one. Some of them have pictures of the rabbit if we happen to have one. We had a rabbit that was actually a registered Champagne d'Argent, so we had the registration papers. All those sorts of things are really, really great to keep with your bunny records, because you never know when you're going to need that sort of stuff, and it's always interesting to be able to go back and check it. Another thing that I do keep, and this should be in a binder all on its own, it isn't, but is a pile of the pedigrees for the rabbits that I have sold. And when we go through how to set up your pedigree, you'll see there's a spot that says sold to and the date. And I keep track of everybody that I sell bunnies to so that I have a copy of the pedigrees. This is something I think is important when you start selling them, because then when people come back to you to buy another one, you have a record of what rabbits they've already got so that you can try and best match what you have with them. That's kind of a little bit of a customized service, I suppose, but you know, hopefully they've also kept their pedigree records that you sent. We don't sell any rabbits unpedigreed, so. So here we're going to take a closer look at Tommy's pedigree. Tommy is a rabbit we are still currently using in our breeding program. The basic layout of your pedigree, you have the rabbit that you're making the pedigree about, his parents or her parents, grandparents, and then great-grandparents. We do not really keep records further back than that on each individual, but you can obviously go to the grandparents' pedigree if you had those, or great-grandparents, and see further down the line. For us, when we breed our rabbits, the important part is to make sure that you have as little as possible crossover between the rabbits in this particular animal's pedigree to the one you're breeding to. One of the things we aim for, or really try, is to not have any similarities in the grandparent or the parent line. So sometimes when we get into the great-grandparents, we'll see a similarity, you know, with one or two bunnies. But that for us, for what our purpose is with the rabbits, is plenty of diversity in the genetics within the individual rabbit. You want to fill in at the top here your animal's number, if they have a pet name, date of birth. Weight I only really put in when they're older. I don't do it at a young age because it really is irrelevant. And as you go down into the more detail of that rabbit, you'll see there's the spot for his ear number, for his tattoo, registration if it happens to be a registered rabbit, and winnings if you happen to show. We do not, but I still put that information in the pedigree because some of the people I sell rabbits to do show, so then they have it. The big part that I try and keep track of is other info. This is where I would enter if the rabbit had a certain number of babies in a litter, or if we happen to have any blue Dargent rabbits or Brun Dargent rabbits that popped up. That means that that's somewhere in that animal's genetics. So those are little details that you'd want to kind of enter in under the other info section. But beyond that, you're basically just going back with father, mother, and a little bit about them, and you keep going. Another thing that's very important to make sure you have on your pedigree is your farm name or rabbitry name, your address, and that information is there so that those people that purchase from you can always find you and buy more or whatever they'd like to do. And I always end up here at the bottom with the, I hereby certify that this pedigree is correct to the best of my knowledge and belief. And you always sign that. That's just I think it's kind of like an honor system, really, because there is no higher association that really tracks this. It is all just done on individual records. And then up in the top corner you have a sold to with their address and the date you sold that rabbit, just for records.
So that's a really good summary of how we keep records. And I'll admit I usually am not the one that actually keeps the pedigree book. That's Stephanie that does, which is why she went through it with everybody, because she knows her rabbits better than I do. But I guess probably the big question here is, why bother with keeping the pedigrees? Now, on one side of the fence, if you do want to show, or you want to sell to people that want to show, etc., that's kind of required. Taking all that aside for a moment, the important part here is records. You're keeping records of your herd of rabbits, because obviously rabbits are something you could be your own self-sufficient unit, and once you have enough rabbits, you hypothetically could never bring another one in if you needed to. So it can help you avoid having to bring in new rabbits. That's a pretty big...
It should also be said too, even if you cross your rabbits, you should still keep.
Well, and that kind of, yeah, so that kind of comes into the production qualities, because some of the pieces that you can add on here, and even knowing how related they are, although there's different opinions on this, in our 8 years of raising rabbits and breeding rabbits, we find we get pretty good results. We have a relatively diverse herd from a genetic standpoint. So we can usually come up with combinations that are not super close related, but at the same time you start getting, you call it like uniformity in your herd. So your herd is like a little population of rabbits that you're managing, but you've got enough diversity to keep that going forever. So that probably right there is the biggest, in my mind, the biggest reason you've got those records. And you can easily go into the book, or if you do a computer program or whatever, and you can quickly look and see, all right, I want to breed this one, and they only have such and such great-grandparent in common. That should potentially yield a pretty good result, and I like these rabbits for these reasons, so let's see what happens. I think in recent years, or at least as long as I've been raising livestock, a lot of people have the opinion of, pedigrees and registered animals and this, that, and whatever. Why bother? It's only for show. I just want them for meat. So why would I go to that effort? And it's kind of like anything else. Going to the effort to keep the records. Does the pedigree of the animal and the lineage directly equate to meat or fur value? No, but if you've got a long-term goal, you're going to want to know who's related to who and who comes from which original rabbits and whatnot, so that 5 or 6 years down the line you don't get to the part that maybe your number of bunnies per litter starts to go down. Well, if you don't keep any records, you may not even realize that that can be one of the negatives of what they call inbreeding depression. So you get to that point, if you haven't kept the records, you've got no idea why it's happening.
What's tipped the scale to...
Yeah. Is it genetics? Is it management? Is it something completely different? But at least if you've kept the records, you can kind of confidently say, well, we've been using the equivalent of outcrossing within our population, so it shouldn't be inbreeding depression. That's a big topic, but it's probably just touching the iceberg. But rabbits are a great starting point because they're forgiving. So you can get used to keeping track of the paperwork. It definitely opens you up to markets to sell breeding stock, which can really help you, as you saw from our economic video. It can really help you justify the cost.
Balance the budget.
Yeah, balancing the cost of keeping them, which is another thing that just reduces your overall overhead. So if meat is your goal, there's still value there. But anyways, I think that's kind of it. We'll probably touch on this again because
it's a broad
happens
topic.
All the time. It's a broad topic and it affects everything really.